Hello, welcome back to my channel if you're new here. My name is Mary and today's video is going to be my wrap up for the month of May. I am going to start as usual by going through my reading stats. So I will start with that. In May, I read 14 books. I DNF'd one book. I also read 5,590 pages. And for genres, I read 4 books that I would consider general or literary fiction, 3 books that I would consider fantasy, 3 books that I would consider sci-fi, 1 mystery, 1 thriller, 1 historical fiction, and 1 classic. I managed to read 4 books by male authors and 10 books by female authors. And then race-wise, I read 8 books by white authors, 0 books by black authors, 6 books by other assorted person of color authors. I believe 5 of them were Asian authors and 1 was an indigenous author. For the countries that I read from the USA, England, and Canada, which I believe is the same as last month. And then I did not read any physical books this month, but I did listen to 11 audiobooks and I read 3 books with an ebook. I hope that makes sense. For demographic, I read 12 adult and 2 young adult books, no middle grade again this month. None of the books I read were translated this month, and the settings were California, England, Spokane, Washington, Manhattan/New York City, Los Angeles, California specifically, Ohio and Cleveland, Ohio specifically, Ecuador and Michigan, as well as some books that were set in fantasy worlds. And then I read 2 books that have what I would consider queer rep. And then for star ratings, I gave 0 1 stars this month, 2 2 stars, 1 2.5 star, 2 3.5 stars. I believe both of them I rounded down to 3 on Goodreads. 9 4 stars, 1 4.5 star, which I rounded up on Goodreads, but I might change it to a 4 star. I haven't decided yet. And then 1 5 star, which is an average of 4.2 stars. So while I did read some books that I really didn't like very much, I read a lot of books that I really enjoyed. And so we're going to start with the first book that I read in May and also my favorite book of the month, which was Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. This is a mystery following an indigenous girl who lives in Michigan, I think. Don't quote me on that. But there is a crime that happens where someone gets shot, and she actually sees this happen right in front of her. It's a person she knows is shot and killed, and then the person who shoots and kills her then kills himself. And so she sees this crime, and it sort of unravels like why this might have happened and what's going on the reservation. And the other big part of this book is that the main character is half indigenous, half white, and so she's never really felt like she belongs in either world. She's not a member of the tribe because her mother is, I believe, the white family, and they didn't want her to become a member of the tribe. And so her mom and her dad also like weren't really allowed to be together. So she has a half brother, I think, who's very close in age to her, which is similar if you read The Hate You Give. There's a similar situation happening there. But this is it follows the main character is the one whose mom did not end up with the dad. So it explores like family dynamics. It also explores like finding yourself and who you are, and obviously there's this mystery at the center of all of it. I really, really liked this book. There is a weird element to it that I can't really tell you what it is without spoiling it, and I wasn't entirely sure how I felt about that aspect. It involves a relationship with someone who is like not exactly who they say they are, and there's a character, just like some of the ways that was handled I felt was kind of weird, but I guess it's ultimately fine. Like the main character is 18 and a graduate of high school at this point, so it's not like she's a kid, but it was a little weird for me to read. But I did really, really end up loving that book. I'm so glad that I finally read it. I know this was really popular a couple years ago here on BookTube, and I'm glad that I finally got to it. The next book that I want to talk about is the book that I originally gave 5 stars and have since walked back my rating on, and that's Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. So this is a mystery thriller set in New York City, and we follow this main character who, at the beginning of the book, is like really down on her luck, and she ends up getting this kind of like dream job of house sitting in this really expensive, fancy, old money apartment building in Manhattan. And she is told like you get $4,000 a month to stay in this apartment, but you can't sleep anywhere else. No one is allowed to come visit. No one can come over. Like there's like all these specific rules. She's like not even really supposed to tell the other people that she's living there. And then very quickly, she realizes that things are not like as idyllic as they might seem. And there's a character that goes missing, and she wants to figure out what's happened to this character. And so it's her trying to unravel this plot. I will say the plot twist in this book was spoiled for me years ago. So I watched a spoiler video of it when it first came out, I guess, on accident. And I heard the spoilers for it. And normally I feel like I forget the ending of thrillers pretty easily. But this one like has stuck in my brain. And I've talked about this a couple times when I talk about this book, but it's because there's a TV show that has a very similar plot twist, and it just like stuck. It's stuck in here. So I'm not going to tell you what it is, obviously, because I don't want to spoil it for you, but I thought that might ruin my experience with this book, but it didn't. I actually really, really enjoyed this book. I also mentioned this in the vlog that I talked about this book in, which I will link for you hopefully, but Riley Sager, this is my second book by him that I've read, and some people really love his books, and I like them. I think he's got really unique ideas, and he writes interesting characters and character dynamics, but he tends to really lean into red herrings, and I don't know how I feel about that. Like, there's some things that happen in this book and Home Before Dark, which is the other one that I read, where it's like, he's very clearly trying to trick the reader into not being able to figure out what's happening. That being said, I knew the whole time what the plot twist in this one was, and I did think that there were enough clues laid to where you could have, like a savvy reader could have potentially figured it out. It would be difficult to get everything exactly right because of the like quantity of red herrings and things to throw the reader off the trail, but I really, really enjoyed this book. I had a really good time reading it, and I'm excited to read more Riley Sager now. For the 4 stars in the order that I read them in, because I don't really have like a particular order of enjoyment for these. Also, a lot of these, I should have mentioned, the vlog where I read a lot of these books is my Buzzwordathon reading vlog, because I picked a lot of books this month that had every in the title, which was the buzzword for May. So if you haven't seen that video, again, it should be linked somewhere in this video. But I then read Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng for that vlog, and this has a TV show on it now, but it's basically, it's like, I always thought that these were like mystery thrillers. They are not. So they are contemporary books or like general fiction that has like a mystery element. And Little Fires Everywhere follows primarily these 2 families. And one of the families is a single mom, Mia, and her daughter. They're the Warrens. And then I can't remember the last name of the other family, but it's a mom, a dad, and they have 4 children. And they own a duplex, which Mia and her daughter are renting. And then the main like catalyst to the story is that there is this woman who is friends with the like main white family, and she adopts this baby that was left at a fire station, I think. And the baby is Asian, and Mia finds out through work that she knows the mother of this baby, and the mother of the baby actually wants the baby back now. And so it's a lot of back and forth on like the ethics of allowing this family to adopt this child. And the child has been with them for like 8 months at this point. But if the mother wants it back, like, should she be able to take her child back, and all of the ethics and all of that. And it was really interesting. It explored a lot the different dynamics with the families and like the dynamics that race play into things. It's also set in this like really not exclusive suburb necessarily, but like kind of, it's not like a gated community, but it is like a suburb within a suburb of Cleveland. And I thought that was really interesting. The suburb is called Shaker Heights. I don't think it's real, but I have not looked into it, so it could be. But I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was very well paced, and the characters are definitely the focus. So it's a very character driven story, but I did enjoy the characterization. You also get points of view from each of the main characters, which was really fun to read. The next book that I gave 4 stars was Everything Here is Beautiful by Mira T. Lee, which again, I read for my every buzzword reading vlog. And this is another, like, I would consider it more literary fiction, but it's a story of 2 sisters who are Chinese American, and it follows their relationship when they're kids, but it's primarily when they're adults. So one of the sisters is 7 years older, and Lucia is the name of the younger sister, and she has schizoaffective disorder. And I would say she's the main character of the book, because the book fully revolves around her marriage, her relationships, her life, and how having schizoaffective disorder has disrupted her life, and also how it disrupts like everyone around her's life. So when we get the point of view of this older sister, it's never really about the older sister's life. It's about her trying to help Lucia with different problems that she's having. I thought this book was really interesting. I love a sibling relationship in books. I find that like one of my favorite dynamics to read, but I did think that this dynamic was a little like, not dynamic, this story, it was a little slow for me, and it wasn't like, it's never going to be a favorite book, but I do think it was like beautifully written, and I really enjoyed a lot of the subject matter in it. But a lot of the time that I was reading it, I was like, okay, where is this going? Like, this was definitely not a super plot focused book. And I think I am more of a plot reader than a character reader, but I can like character driven books if there's enough plot to keep me interested. Like Celeste Ng's books that I'm going to talk about another one here in a second, but the 2 books that I read by her this month, were very character-driven books, but they also have enough of an underlying plot to like keep me invested, if that makes sense. So everything here is beautiful. It was just a little too much on the character side without enough plot really happening. It was almost a slice of life book, except for it encompassed like large chunks of this woman's life. But it was just a little less focused than I tend to like my plots being, if that makes sense. The next book I'm gonna talk about is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this is a booktube darling. Everybody loves this book. It also has a TV show based on it now. And I have not watched the show, and I'm honestly not really sure I want to, because I heard so many negative things about the show when it first came out that I like don't really have an interest in it. But this is a like fake, it's like a mockumentary, but book form. And I listened to this as an audiobook, and I'm really glad I did. I think that's like the best way to consume this story. I think it would have been really boring to just read it, because a lot of it is interviews with a reporter interviewing the members of this like old 70s rock band, and they're like friends and family. And the band was Daisy Jones and the Six. And so it originally was this band, the Six, and then there was a singer named Daisy Jones who ended up like getting enmeshed. A lot of people say that this book, like they forgot that Daisy Jones and the Six wasn't a real band while they were reading it. And I can see that, because the author did a really good job of fleshing out these characters and like their storyline. And it feels very reminiscent to a lot of like music memoirs that I have read. If you've been around on this channel for a while, you know that I don't love music memoirs. I don't love music and songs and songwriting and singing and all of that stuff in books. I don't know why. I just find it boring. So this wasn't terrible, but I didn't like that aspect of it. I just will never be interested in. I just don't care enough. But I did think this like fake celebrity thing was cool. I do want to read Evelyn Hugo. Is that what the other one is? The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I'm interested in reading that as well. My biggest gripe with this book, the reason that it wasn't 5 stars, is I felt like it like ramped up and got really, really interesting, and then it just sort of ended. And also I hated the ending. So if you know, you know, I'm not gonna spoil it, but it reminded me again of a TV show that I've seen, which like notoriously the fans hate the ending of. And so I thought that was really interesting. If you've read this book, I'd be curious to know if you know what show I'm talking about. But again, I don't want to spoil it, because like, I don't know. I don't, if you haven't read the book and you have seen the show, or you haven't seen the show but you have read the book, I don't want to spoil either of them for you. But yeah, so I would be curious if you have guesses to what show I'm talking about, if you would leave them below. I'm curious to see if other people think this as well. I said it in my review, but I blocked it for spoilers. But I was like, this is how we're gonna end it? Are you kidding? So anyways, the other Celeste Ng book that I read, I also gave 4 stars, and that was Everything I Never Told You. And this one was her first novel, and it's about this family, which it's a white mom and an Asian dad, and they have 3 children, I believe, and they're living in Ohio again. And in this story, one of the children is found dead at the beginning of the book, and the parents and the siblings are trying to figure out what happened, basically. And we get each of the characters' perspective in the present, and also in things in the past relating to Lydia, who's the child who's found dead. And eventually we get Lydia's perspective as well. And I thought this book was really, really good. I remember when I was reading it at first, I thought it was more boring than Little Fires Everywhere, but it did ramp up and get really interesting. Again, both of these books are very character driven, but the plot device, or like the main plot thing, is like some sort of mystery sort of happening. I liked the mystery better in this one, but I do think I liked overall Little Fires Everywhere better. So you'll have to let me know if you've read both of these, which one you like better or how you felt about them. But I did enjoy that book. The next book that I read and gave 4 stars was A Scanner Darkly by Philip K. Dick, which is a classic sci-fi. And this book I watched the movie of with Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder from like 2005. And as soon as I watched the book or watched the movie, I was like, I have to read this book now. I was never really interested in reading it before. I think I had been at one point, but then I read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by the same author, which is the Blade Runner book, and I didn't really love it. So I was like, maybe this is not an author for me. But I think having watched the movie and understanding the context of it, I did like this book much more than I liked the Blade Runner book that I read. And it's about this guy who, I feel like I need to set the stage. So it's set in the future where there's this drug called like death maybe, and it's got this interesting property where like if you take it for a while, it's like an addictive street drug, but if you take it for a while, it separates the hemispheres of your brain to where you can't, like, you lose track of all reality forever, like even when you're not on it. And so our main character is a guy who is a like deep cover cop, and nobody knows who is undercover in these situations because they have these suits that are called scramble suits that will make it to where no one can perceive you while you're wearing the suit. And so that's what he wears when he's like at his cop job. And then in his normal life, he wears normal clothes and is like doing drugs with these people that he's trying to like, they aren't in trouble. They're trying to figure out where the drug is coming from and to go get the person who is like, or the entity that is manufacturing this drug and getting it out to people. And Philip K. Dick wrote this book because he was really into drugs and he had a lot of friends that were really into drugs. And he has this like really heartwarming author's note at the end of the book. And it's talking about how this book is like dedicated to all his friends who died. And he lists all of them and how many of them are like dead now, how many of them are still alive, but have these like horrifying problems that are like still with them now. And I thought that was like really moving. I honestly like almost gave this book 5 stars because of the author's note. But again, I don't know that I like love Philip K. Dick's books, but I just thought that it was such a like imaginative and well thought out analogy, metaphor. I don't know if either of those, like fictionalization and like sci-fi-ification, if you will, of like addiction and what it can do to people, to communities, and how like the outside world sort of reacts to that. And I believe he also wrote this during the like war on drugs period with crack cocaine and the crack cocaine epidemic in the United States. So I thought that was really interesting. I do recommend this book. And also if you are interested in reading the book, the movie's great. It is animated, which is kind of weird, but it's animated and it looks like real, like it's animated Keanu Reeves and Winona Ryder, which is very strange. Like it's them just like in a weird animation style, which makes it very like trippy and odd. Like I kept forgetting as I was watching it that it was an animated movie, but I really, really liked it and I highly recommend it. The next 4-star that I gave was The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty, which is the last book in her trilogy that starts with Kingdom of Copper, I think. City of Brass. I always say it starts with Kingdom of Copper. That's the second book. I don't know why. That's the one that sticks out in my brain. I think it's the alliteration that really gets me. But this book, the series is about a girl who is living in Egypt. I don't know when. It's historical, but I don't know exactly what time period. I'm so sorry. But she's living in Egypt, and she is basically working as a con artist. So she has this ability where she can tell if people are sick, and she can kind of heal them. But a lot of people hear that she has this and come to her with things that aren't real ailments. And so she's got this deal with the apothecary that she will send people to him with these like fake ailments, and he will prescribe them medication for them or treatments, and she will get a cut of the sale price for those treatments. And then one day she is like helping someone with an exorcism of sorts, and she accidentally summons a djinn, and the djinn sweeps her away to this magical like land called the City of Brass, and she learns about the djinn and the deva and what's going on in like Daevabad, which is the fantastical world, I suppose. The Daevabad trilogy, I think is what this is called. Anyways, but that's what it's about. It goes pretty off the rails in the end of book 1. And then book 2, I was not a fan of. I read it last month, but there's a read along going on YouTube that I will again try to remember to link the people. I always forget, but I'll try to remember to link the people who are doing it. The live show for this book, I believe, is upcoming. I might have missed it actually. It might have been today. I don't remember when it was supposed to be, but I want to go to one of those because I'm curious to see other people's thoughts on these books. I really, 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 really liked the first one. The second one I really disliked, and the third one was better than the second one, but it didn't really get good for me until like the second half. So like, I think this series is very like hit or miss for me. Part of the problem for me was the pacing, because there's a time jump in the second book at the very beginning, and I just didn't like that. It took me the whole book to get back into it. So much of what's happening, like I feel like there was like character development that happened in the first book that is completely walked back in book 2. And then there's just like different convoluted things that happen, and it's to make the plot like more dire, or like the circumstances more dire, but it didn't work for me. I didn't like it. So a lot of the choices I didn't like, but overall I think it's a fine book. And I think if you like fantasy, it's YA fantasy, you should give it a go. Like, it's a very interesting world. I really do love the first one, but from there it gets a little convoluted. And I'm wondering, because I did read the first one physically and then I listened to the second and third as audiobooks, I wonder if I would have better luck with them if I continued reading them physically the way that I did the first one, but I only own the first book. And so that's kind of how I felt about that. So a little bit of a disappointment still, but overall I think the series ended well. Like, I really liked the ending of it that ultimately happened. It just took a while to get there for me to be okay with what was going on. And it was almost like reading improv where I had to just be like, okay, fine, this is happening. Let's just ignore the fact that I wanted something different to happen and enjoy what's going on, I guess. The next book that I gave 4 stars to was Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too by Jomny Sun, which is a graphic novel that I read in like an evening. I think it took me like less than an hour. But it's about this little alien guy who is tasked with going to Earth to talk to humans about what it means to be human. And he goes around and he asks all these little like forest creatures what it's like, what it means to be human. And he asks the trees and he asks the plants. And then at the end, he finds out that none of them were actually human because humans aren't there. But it's just, the whole thing is about like how it's okay to be different and just like how to be yourself. It was very sweet and uplifting and I liked it. So the art style was fine. I'm not a big graphic novel reader, but I do think if you like graphic novels, if you like something really short and sweet, you might like it. Now I'm gonna talk about the books that I gave 3.5 stars. So the first book that I gave 3.5 stars was To Kill a Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. And this is a Little Mermaid retelling. I really liked this book. I hated the ending of it. And like the last bit I thought was just like kind of cheesy and stupid and I just wasn't a big fan of it. But basically we're following this girl who is a siren, and every year the sirens have to kill somebody on their like the month of their birth. And they take their heart and they keep it, and the number of hearts you have is like how powerful you are and how old you are. And so she always gets princess hearts because that's like her thing. And they make it sound like she's been doing it a long time, but then later it says that she's only like 17 and she started when she was 14 or 15, so like not that long. I don't know. But at the beginning of the book, she goes out with her cousin a month before her own like time to do this because she's gonna help her cousin get a heart. And then she gets greedy and takes a heart as well. And her mom is basically Ursula, and her mom's a sea witch. What is that? Oh, the Little Mermaid. So her mom is like essentially Ursula. And her mom finds out that she took this heart, and she, as a punishment, her mom turns her into a human and says that she has a certain amount of time to like kill this other prince and take his heart and bring it back to her mom. And there's also this thing called the eye of something, which was like the original sea goddess. And the humans took the eye, or one of the eyes, and hid it away because otherwise it would give too much power to the sirens. And so she decides, she hears about this and is like, instead of taking this guy's heart, I'm gonna get him to take me up to this mountain and get this witch eye, bring it back to my mom, and then I'll also bring his heart with me. And so it's that, and then obviously she and the guy fall in love. Like, that's the story. And I did think their love story was cute. I liked the banter. I liked that he's like a pirate prince, so he prefers to be a pirate to being a prince. I liked a lot of elements of this book, but ultimately, like, it was fine. It's not really anything to write home about for me. I did like the writing style a lot. I thought it was really well written. But again, like, the end was just clunky. And also, this is the second or third Little Mermaid retelling that I've read, and I just don't think I like them. So maybe that's part of why I didn't like it. But yeah, that's how I felt about that one. It started off really well, and then the ending just sort of tanked it for me. Not tanked, but like, I didn't love it, you know? The other book that I gave 3.5 stars was Other People's Things by Carrie Ann King. And this is about a woman who is a kleptomaniac, but in her mind, she gets like voices of objects that don't want to be where they are and they want to be moved. So when she steals something, she's not stealing it for herself, she's stealing it because the object wants to be somewhere else. That's like her theory behind it. And she's just gotten out of jail. And then she's trying to leave her husband because her husband is really abusive. And her mom and her sister are helping her out. So her sister owns a cleaning business, and her sister's like, you can come clean with me, but like if you steal anything, you're going to be fired. And so of course she does immediately take a book from one client's house and put it in another client's house, and it becomes this whole thing. But then it turns out that the book is like from someone who, the person who she puts it in the house, like there's a note in it from that guy, and he means something to this woman. And so you're like unraveling this mystery, and also sort of finding out like, is this girl really, does she really have this gift where she like can tell what objects need what people or like what things. And I liked this. I thought it was good. A little weird, a little cheesy, but it was definitely worth the read. It was not long. I listened to it as an audiobook and I enjoyed it. So I thought it was fine. 3.5 stars. I think I rounded it down to 3 because I don't think it's like life-changing, but it was a good book. Like, it was good. I think if it sounds like something you would like, I think you would like it. I will say there are trigger warnings in this book because I'm making it sound like it's very light and fluffy. There's some serious stuff that she talks about and serious trauma that the main character goes through. So maybe check. I don't know if there are trigger warnings listed somewhere, but like trigger warnings for suicide and trigger warnings for like violence and on-page death. If any of those things like you can't read, you could probably skip it. Like, it's not a huge part of the story, but like it is significant enough to get brought up twice, just so you know. Now I'm going to talk about my 2.5 star book that I rounded down because I'm annoyed. I read the 4th book in the Game of Thrones series called A Feast for Crows, and I did not like it. I'm so sad too because I really enjoyed the 3rd book. I thought, like, okay, it's finally picking up. We're finally getting into things that I'm interested about. I was not interested in anything that happened in the 4th book. I've mentioned before that my favorite characters in Game of Thrones are Daenerys and Tyrion, and I also really like the Stark sisters, like Anya and Sansa. Like, I'm getting more into their parts. I think they're at least interesting. Almost none of those characters are in this book. So for me, it was just a very boring read. Like, we're following one character who's like an unimportant side character on a quest, and I didn't like that character, and I didn't care about her quest the whole time she was on it. We also follow some of the other, like, original, like, I don't know, like, higher up people in some of the families. I'm trying not to spoil anything if you haven't read or watched Game of Thrones. And the problem with talking about Game of Thrones is so many main characters die that, like, it's hard to talk about it because I don't want to spoil who lives and who dies, especially because sometimes you think a character is dead, but then they'll come back. So I'm just going to leave it at that, I guess. But, like, I did not like this book. It was so boring. But that also seems to be the consensus online, is that this book came out like 5 or 6 years after the 3rd one, which is by and large the one that people like the best of what I've seen. Like, everyone talks about how that book was like, it's really good. And then this one came out late and it was just not very good. So I'm going to read Dance with Dragons in June this month. And then I will probably never read a Game of Thrones book again because he might never come out with another one. But I don't know if I'm hoping that Dance with Dragons is better because of how much time I end up having to spend reading these books, or if I hope that it's bad so that I'm not upset that I can't read the next one because it doesn't exist. So I don't know. Your mileage may vary on Game of Thrones, but I would love to hear other people's opinions because I know that there's like diehard fans of the series, but also like, which one is your favorite? Did you like A Feast for Crows? If so, why? Anyways, I'm very confused and concerned, but that is my last 2.5 star, and now I have 2 stars to talk about. The first is Into the Forest by Jean Hegland, and this book I read as an ebook. It was only like 240 pages, but it took me like 2 weeks to read, and it's about these sisters again. So this month I tested my theory on if I like sister books, and I do like some, but not others. But it's about these sisters who are living in California, and they live like 45 minutes from the nearest town. And before the book starts, it's them and their parents. And when you, like, present day with the girls, their parents are both dead. And they don't have any contact with the outside world. And you find out that it's because somehow the power went out in everywhere. And so it's like, it's dystopian. I don't know how else to explain it because it like doesn't really explain exactly what's happened, but the power went out. There's no more food in any of the stores. There's no more gas to put in the car. So that's why the girls are stuck in the woods, living by themselves, trying to like plant the food that they can. And their parents had enough like canned food storage to like last them a while. And at the time that the book starts, it's only been a couple months and they're thinking that it's going to end soon. But then you follow them through like a year plus living like this. And there's like different characters that kind of come in, but like not really. So it's mostly just these girls. And you find out like who these other characters that they talk about are, and what happened to their mom and what happened to their dad. And it's really, really sad, but also like the sisters, just everything that's done in this book is done for the metaphor of it. which I think if you've read it, you'll agree with it. And I just, it's not realistic. Like it feels like you're reading a metaphor, which is fine, but I just didn't love it, if that makes sense. I feel like you should take a shot every time I say I don't love something, because I don't love a lot of these things. But I did think it was really interesting because there's a part of this book where they're walking around like foraging in the woods, and they hear like rustling, and one of the sisters thinks it's a man and the other sister thinks it's a bear. And then they basically say like, I couldn't decide which was worse, if we were to run into a bear or a man. And I think that's really funny because there's that TikTok thing going around right now where people are saying that women are saying if they were on a hiking trail by themselves, they'd rather see a bear than a man, which I would agree with, because a bear lives in the woods. If you're a man, why are you there? And also, like, I don't know, like the dangers that a bear poses versus the dangers that a man poses. So I thought it was interesting that this book talks about it, especially because I read it like right around the time that I was seeing all those videos. And I don't know if this book is where that idea came from or not. I will say this book has a movie starring Elliot Page, pre-transition. And I don't know who else is in it, but I saw the movie a long time ago when it first came out, which was like 2011, I think. This book is from the 90s. And all of that, like, the book is fine. Okay, I just didn't particularly like it. So I gave it 2 stars because I was annoyed at how long it took me to read it, and then I hated the ending, and I just didn't really feel any, like, positivity towards it. That being said, it's a very well-loved book. Like, people love this book. It won some awards. Like, I have a minority opinion, and I'm okay with that. But that was that book. And the other book that I gave 2 stars was Love and Friendship by Jane Austen, which I finally listened to. It's only like 90 pages. I listened to a free audiobook of it, and it's an epistolary novella, I guess, written between these 2 friends. And it's like, I didn't know this while reading it, and I probably would have liked it more if I did. But Jane Austen wrote this when she was a teenager, and she was making fun of romance novels. And I just think that's very, like, cheeky, but ultimately I didn't love it. And I also thought it was funny that it, like, the names in the episode, like this Love and Friendship, are reused in later works. And I don't know if this is like an early iteration of like Sense and Sensibility is the prime example. That was her first published work. And that's like what it reminded me the most of. But if you know, I'd be interested in that. I still love Jane Austen. Even though I don't love all her books, I think I understand what she's doing, and not everything is for me, but that is totally fine. But that is gonna wrap up this wrap up. I hate to end on that note because I did dislike Into the Forest more than I disliked Love and Friendship, but that's fine. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you have read any of these books, please let me know in the comments down below how you felt about them. Also, feel free to let me know what you read in May. I am always curious about what other people are reading and what you think I might like. I know I have some unpopular opinions on some of these things, especially some of these really hyped things, but I would love to hear if you agree or disagree with me. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you have not already, because I do post 2 videos every week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!